let's move on. If we just talk very briefly about what we mean by mentoring, we kind of support the notion of developmental mentoring. So it's a little bit different from the old master and apprentice type model that maybe people think about, where it's in that model people are handing down from the lofty heights, their pearls of wisdom. What we're talking about in developmental mentoring is more an exchange of knowledge, experience and goodwill. And often there's the benefit for the less experienced person is more confidence, clearer purpose, insight and wisdom, but the way it's done is slightly different. So in developmental mentoring, the mentor is helping the mentee come to some conclusions and some answers for themselves. So that's the model of mentoring we think is most effective and builds capacity in people rather than just giving people the answers. Just briefly, why we think mentoring is great for associations. We know that mentoring does help to attract and retain members. It builds an attractive brand. We know that people that get involved with mentoring programs in an association will be more engaged with other members and engaged with the management of that association. I think one thing that's maybe often overlooked, which I'd encourage you to think more deeply about, is how you can use mentoring a little bit more strategically. So that's why we gave the title of this webinar, we had the word strategic, because we think mentoring can really help fulfill the association's higher order purpose, and I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. The more you focus on that, the more compelling the argument is for mentoring and the easier it is to get people committed and engaged in your program. There's also research that suggests that as you train mentors in mentoring skills, it's actually developing their leadership capacity. So they can take those skills back into their profession or their industry, or even use those skills in your association in a leadership role. So some of the organisations that we work with are actually using mentoring in that way and attaching mentoring to leadership programs where maybe people are getting training in leadership, but they're also having a mentor that helps them embed some of that learning. If you build a program right, there's no reason you should be losing money on it. More difficult to make a profit, but certainly break even is really not that difficult. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. So if we think about some of the impacts that mentoring can have, and I want to talk here about maybe thinking about that higher order purpose. On the left, we've got some of the more typical things where people say, well, if I have a mentor, I'm going to increase my level of confidence. It might help me not make some of the mistakes I would have made. It's going to help me build skills. And therefore that leads to maybe if I'm in my own business, it could be, my business success or the success of the business that I'm in or whatever endeavour that I'm involved with. On the right-hand side, we've got some maybe less obvious benefits of mentoring, and this is one that's been used specifically by one of our clients here in Australia, who are the Australian Veterinarian Association, where young vets often have to go out into areas where they've left their families and support networks behind. They're in an isolated situation. So giving them a mentor reduces isolation. It gives them some emotional support and some coping skills when they're transitioning into their first job. And in fact, for the vets here in Australia, and I suspect it's the same in other parts of the world, it's actually helping to prevent depression and suicide. There is actually quite a high rate of that. So if you can start thinking about the deeper impact that mentoring can have, it's helping you build that more compelling case for your mentoring programs. So I might just pause there. We've covered a little bit about what mentoring is and thinking about maybe some of the deeper levels of impact. Are there any questions or comments you'd like to make at this point? We'd love to get people involved. What's your experience in trying to think about, the more strategic ways that mentoring can be used. Any thoughts? If you want to ask a question and have your microphone open, just type Q in the chat box. Otherwise, just type your question in as we go. Or if you want to just make a comment, just type A and we'll just open your mic. You're all very quiet this morning, Alex, so...
Yeah, I'm just kind of watching to see if anybody kind of interacts in the chat window. Feel free to send through any questions if anything's coming up for anybody, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. And we will send you a copy of this presentation, by the way, so don't feel that you have to take lots of notes or copy screenshots or anything like that. We promised that we would share... Sorry, go on.
Peter has just asked a question about reducing suicide, saying that that's a serious role for a mentor. Has this come up in your research?
Yeah, so at the Veterinarian Association, the mentors are given some additional training to what they would normally receive, which is a short training around mental health and how to spot a mental health issue. So they are actually told, you don't deal with this yourself. If you feel that someone is depressed, if, God forbid, someone has a plan to take their own life or do something serious, then here's the protocol to follow and how to deal with it, but don't deal with it on your own. So because there's such a high level of depression and suicide, mentors have to be prepared for this, but they're very well supported through the process, and we're not expecting them to actually, you know, make an intervention by themselves. Hopefully that answers the question. But, you know, the program isn't advertised that way, but we know that's one of the key roles that it's playing.
Yeah, one characteristic of depression and suicide is the individual often feels cut off from community or isolated. So having a mentor often helps in that way. Obviously, the mentor doesn't need to be the individual's counselor or psychologist, but just being there and talking through career development decisions actually helps in a way.
Yeah, okay. So the different models of mentoring programs that we're seeing across the world, there's, you know, some are being run globally, there's national, they're being done at a local level. Many are still face-to-face, but increasingly going virtual. And by virtual, we mean using any technology that's not face-to-face. Some are the traditional model of one-to-one, a few are trying group mentoring. Some are structured. By that we mean a program that has a beginning, a middle and an end, and people go through as a cohort, versus informal, which tends to be more of the put a list of mentor names up on a website with profiles and let people choose their own. There's peer mentoring, which is obviously people who are at the same level and experience. There's reverse mentoring, which is where you actually flip the roles around. And then there's the more regular model of mentoring, which is by far the most dominant, which is pairing people who are more junior with someone who's more experienced. We're seeing programs that are run at either a student, a graduate, a young professional level, lots of diversity programs, particularly dealing with issues of women and how to get more women into a particular profession or industry. We're not seeing as many mid to late career mentoring programs, but we would like to see that happening, because we think with the changing world and people maybe technology changing the way that people are going to be employed, there will be more mid-career and late career people who actually could really benefit from a mentor helping them through where to go. There are programs that are self-serve, which I mentioned before, so someone can go onto a platform and choose their own mentor. The majority are using admin matching, so somebody in a central location who are matching people up according to an application. And we're seeing different levels of support, from what we would consider very low touch, which is pairing people up and off you go, no support, all the way through to quite a lot of support through a program. Now someone, this is Alex, has asked a question. Does anyone have a mentoring program at the moment? What kind of program are you running? So please, if you are running a program, maybe put some information in because it all adds to the research. This research that we're running is again across the world. If you get a chance to do our research survey, we'd really appreciate it. We'll be reporting on the findings early next year. So just quickly on a couple of case studies, I wanted to share with you a couple of virtual programs because this is one of the most common questions that we get. How do you run a virtual program? What does it involve? And then another one which isn't a virtual program. So the first, these first two, they're running across distance. The first case is actually one of our clients here in Australia, which is, as you probably know, quite a large country. So we've got people matched up right across the countryside. The second one, the Cherie Blair program, is one that's running, it's a global program. We're not involved with it, but one of our partners, Professor David Clutterbuck, was instrumental in the program design for that, so we do know quite a lot about it. All the training for both these programs is conducted online, and program events are run by webinar. So if we look at the first one, which is run by an organisation called Australian Women in Resources Alliance, it's advertised as an e-mentoring program. The issue that the mining industry here was facing was there was something like only 15% female participation in the resources sector and a great appetite for trying to attract and retain more women in mining and related industries. The AURA, which is the body that runs this program, got a level of government funding and has rolled out a program involving 400 pairs in the last 2 years, and they've been rolled out in small cohorts every 1 to 2 months. And the reason it was done that way was because they wanted to give people access to the program, you know, within a short time of wanting it rather than maybe having to wait for the next intake. Many programs run only once a year or maybe twice a year, and what you find is when mentees have a need, they're having a long time to wait and they don't appreciate that. The other benefit of having smaller cohorts, and we're talking under 20 to a cohort, is that they can get involved in a webinar. So when we're running a webinar like this, we can have people with their microphones open, talking to one another and sharing their experiences. We started in that program running training by webinar, but we weren't finding it very effective, particularly for mentors. It's very, very difficult to train a mentor in mentoring skills effectively by webinar. So we developed an online training instead, which is working much better. All the events, so we have a program open, a progress review where we invite people to come and share their experience, how it's going. That's done by webinar in the middle of the program, and then we have a program close by webinar at the end. The program administration, you can imagine running 400 pairs, is being done using an online administration platform. In this case, it's one called Cronus, C-H-R-O-N-U-S. It's not ours, it's a partner of ours. There are several around, so if people have questions about that, you can get in touch with us, but we can certainly put you in contact with software programs that you can use to make online admin much easier. The pairs connect by phone, by Skype, FaceTime and email. So in this case, the mentor and the mentees never actually meet, which is interesting. And there is research around academic research, I mean not our research in this case, which actually supports the view that virtual mentoring can be very effective. So the kinds of outcomes we're getting in this virtual program are pretty much what we would expect in a regular program. There are some benefits to virtual mentoring, there are some disadvantages, but there's a couple of benefits. If you're interested in some of the research on virtual mentoring, please go to our website and you can download an article about that. So in this case, when we surveyed people, a good question that you should be asking is, of mentees is, did you achieve the goal that you set for yourself? In this case, people are saying yes, they are. Another good marker of relationship quality is people saying that they intend to stay in contact with their mentors after the program. And we always look for what we call the top box score. So we look for satisfaction with the whole experience, and we like to see a high level of people checking that top box, which is, it's one of the best things I've ever done. Okay, any comments or questions about that before we move on? Please feel free to ask questions. We really do welcome that. Okay, so the next case study I wanted to cover is the Cherie Blair Foundation. You probably know Cherie Blair is married to the ex-Prime Minister of the UK. She started a foundation for mentoring women in business, and it's specifically around entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs in emerging and developing countries, and looking to support them and giving them business success. Since that program began around 4 years ago, they have put through 1,500 female entrepreneurs in 80 countries, which is awesome. It's a 12-month program, it's one-to-one, and the female entrepreneurs are paired with both male and female mentors from around the world. So you've got women in Africa being supported and mentored by women in or men in Europe, for example. These are the technologies that people are using. There are webinar events for the community. And I think an interesting point here is they have over 50 partners. So if you go to their website, and we've given you the link up there to their website, they have funding partners from industry, government, all over the place, over 50 of them. So they've actually got the money to run this program really well. And here's some of the results they get. I'm not going to go through them, but fantastic results, really great program, really making a difference in some of those emerging and developing countries. So again, yeah.
We've got a couple of questions come through. So Judy was just asking about how long was the program for the Aura program?
The Aura program is 9 months. So we run our programs usually anywhere between 6 and 12 months. We think anything less than 6 months, you're not really giving people enough time to build a relationship. More than 12 months is usually more than most mentors will sign up for.
And Peter's asked, how did you source the participants for the Aura program?
Yeah, so the Aura program, because they're a membership organisation, they have the mining companies, all the companies in the sector are members. They put a call out to the organisation to look for both mentees and mentors. So they have a very active website. They do lots of newsletters. They're using all the recruitment tools that we would advise people to use. So direct email, newsletters, website. If you go look at their website, you'll see some of the tools they're using. And I think Alex is just putting up the case study for that. And Alex, somebody's also asked for the virtual mentoring article. Maybe you could put the link up for that at some point.
Yeah, the best place to go is to actually look at the case study for the virtual mentoring. And I'm just about to post up another article around attracting mentors for membership associations for you, Peter. Yeah.
So do go to our website because we've got lots of free downloads, articles, things you feel free to look for resources, and if there's anything you want that isn't there, just contact us. The last case study I wanted to cover is the Australian Veterinary Association, which I mentioned before. I just wanted to share with you how that program is actually being delivered. I mentioned it's one of their initiatives to help tackle the problem they have around depression and suicide. There are other things that other initiatives they've introduced. So really it's all about the mentors helping to prepare graduates for their career ahead and to deal with the challenges of being in their first job looking after animals and dealing with some of, the more difficult things like having to put animals down, which is really not nice for anybody. The program was actually running in a couple of regions already, so it was quite important when this organisation decided they wanted to take it national across the country, that they wanted to look at what they were already doing to see how it could be improved before they just automatically rolled it out. So we got involved at that point. We set up a steering committee of volunteers, one representing each region, and they were supported by us with some research that we conducted amongst their membership to look at what it was that maybe the recipients of mentoring were looking for and what it was that mentors thought that they could deliver. And through the process, which took a couple of months, we came up with a national design that everybody was happy to go with. And the design involves the training and the other events being delivered face-to-face in each region. So in this case, we chose not to go fully virtual because there was such a high level of emotional support needed for these young vets that we felt the face-to-face training, particularly for the mentors, would be beneficial. And an opportunity for also the mentees in each region to get to know the local chapter representatives, so if they had an issue, they had somewhere to go and they knew who they were. Having said that, we've got a national bank of resources that everybody's using, and it's all being centrally coordinated from an administration point of view using the online administration platform. So what we've managed to do is have the best of both worlds, where we've taken the burden of administration away from the regional volunteers, so they don't have to get involved with any of the administration. Literally all they have to do is be trained in how to deliver the training. So we ran a train the trainer for them, and they just have to turn up to the events. Everything else is being coordinated centrally by an admin person, and the admin person their salary is being funded by sponsorship. So this is actually a free program. Nobody participating pays anything, but they've brought 3 sponsors on board who are funding the whole program, which is allowing them to do this program really well. They will roll out up to 700 pairs each year. So it's quite a large program by any standards. So any questions about how that program's delivered?
You've mentioned the funding models, Melissa. You briefly mentioned sponsorship for the Australian Veterinary Association. I'm just mindful it might be useful to actually talk about different funding models, particularly because ORA used government funding, AVA is using some sponsorship, and then you can also charge the mentees, and in some cases you can actually make a profit rather than having to fork out cash for a mentoring program.
Yeah, so I'm getting some feedback here. Why is that happening? Okay, that's better. Alex, I've just muted you, if that's okay. Okay, so there are different funding models, as Alex said. I've got a slide on it, but it's a few slides on, so I'll just talk about it at this point. Actually, maybe we can get there quickly. Okay, so if you are wanting to break even, so really you need to focus on income, not just costs. So some associations are funding their programs by charging the mentees. We've seen fees anywhere between just an administration fee, which might be under $100, all the way through to a few $1,000s. Obviously, if you're charging people a few $1,000s, you have to be delivering, we would say, mentoring plus. So this is probably a face-to-face program where they're getting additional training, maybe guest speakers, lots of events. Typically, we would say, some of our programs charge mentees between $300 and $500. That seems to work quite well. And the reason we actually quite like mentees to be charged is they need some skin in the game. Now, if they're a student and they have no money, clearly you can't do this. But if we're talking young professionals, when people have paid something for their participation, they actually are more committed. The second model is sponsorship, which I mentioned. Program-specific partners really do love the feel-good factor for mentoring. So I've been involved in many programs where we've actually managed to have sponsors stay for up to 10 years. So they sponsor it year after year. They really enjoy their involvement in the program. They get what they want from it. And again, sponsorship can be anywhere up to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. In some rare cases, we've seen government funding. If you've got a really compelling case, then it is worth perhaps looking for government funding. I'm not sure how that works in the US. Here in Australia, for example, the AURA program that I mentioned before, they receive $400,000, which is, I'll just say that again, $400,000 from our national government, because the government was very interested in helping to achieve that goal of getting more women involved in the mining industry. So we'd like to say we were the recipient of a lot of that money. In fact, we weren't. I think most of it went into paying salaries and advertising. And it was over a 3-year period. So those are the different funding models that you can use. Okay, let's see where we are. Nope. Okay. Okay. People often ask us, so what does it take to put a program together? Here's the kind of structure, and you'll notice the case studies that I've talked about all have this kind of structure. There's a program application phase. There's a phase where you'll be matching people up. So there's a matching process, some level of training. So just a word on training. We know that if there is no training available in a mentoring program, the likelihood is that 2 out of 3 of those mentoring relationships that you set up will actually not get traction. In other words, they just will not even start. If you train the mentors, you double the success rate. So you should have 2 out of 3 of your relationships actually getting started and working and probably sticking all the way through to the end. If you train the mentees and other stakeholders, you should get actually around a 90% success rate. So we think 10% dropout rate is acceptable. That's the level that we look for in our programs. And training is a very important part of that. Preparing people to match their expectations and align their expectations in a mentoring relationship is really critical. And for mentors in particular, giving them some of those mentoring skills that maybe they don't have at a high level, like, key listening, questioning skills, being able to challenge appropriately, knowing when to give advice, knowing when to pull back on that, very important. We then introduce everyone to the program in some kind of event. There's a review at some point to see how people are going in a shared environment, and then there's a program close. So that's the structure that we tend to use. If we look back at some of the obstacles that were revealed in our research, here were the problems that people talked about. Not having the resources, finding it difficult to get people to commit, whether that's the mentors and the mentees or other stakeholders, and difficulties with just the time and the resources that you need to implement it. Some of the solutions that people came up with in the research, but also our solutions, if you like, are if you build a business case and you look at different funding models, it could be a combination of mentees pay a small fee and you have sponsorship or some government funding, then there's really no reason why you can't actually fund this quite effectively. Lack of commitment is an engagement and a communications issue. Mentors will be knocking down your doors if you have a compelling case that you need them. And we often find in programs that you get more mentors wanting to be involved than we have mentees for them. There's a great sense of wanting to give back in many of your membership organisations. They then find once they've enrolled in a program, they actually get quite a lot out of the experience as well. So probably their commitment to give back gets them into the program, but the benefits they take away are quite different. And we think another issue is you really do need to embrace technology. We know that millennials expect a lot of the resources to be delivered online, and that's where we're going with our work. What does it take to run a successful program? One useful website that you can go to is ISMPE. We've given you the link there, which is the international standards. To summarise, really, it has 6 different areas of standards that you want to be looking for, but really they're clustered into these 3 areas. First, you must start with a clear purpose. Why are we running this program? What's it going to deliver to the people involved? What's it going to deliver to us as an association? What will it deliver to our broader constituents, so our profession, our industry? Training and support, you'll find that if you start a program and you don't give adequate training, as I mentioned, it's likely to fall over. Support, getting the balance of support is really tricky. If you provide too much structure and too much support, you may get resistance and pushback from people because they feel like they're being constrained. If you don't provide enough support and structure, then people say, well, we don't really know what we're doing. So getting that balance right sometimes is a bit of trial and error. So it's great, you know, if you know other people running mentoring programs, ask them what's the level of support you're giving, and we can obviously advise you on that. And then you do need really good administration. You need records being kept. You need to be able to track communications with people in the program. You need to be evaluating. So sending out surveys or meeting people face-to-face or telephone interviewing so that you know how the mentoring pairs are going through the course of the program, and then evaluating at the end. So, you know, whilst we don't want to scare you, there is a level of administration required to run a successful mentoring program. In terms of selling that then to the board, as I mentioned, you need to have a compelling purpose. So another example would be if you've got a very high dropout rate amongst young professionals, either from your association or your industry or profession, then mentoring is a good initiative. So that's a good reason why. You need to think through which stakeholders need to be involved, and it's really important to get them on board early and demonstrate to the board that they're committed. So a good example of that was setting up our steering committee for the AURA program, where, you know, it was clear that all the regions got on board and they'd been involved in the process and the design of the program. You need a clear and well-researched business plan, and again, we can give you the structure for the kind of business plan that you might put together, just some key headings that you might want to cover, because your board is going to want to know how much is this going to cost, how we're going to resource it, and so on. The what, if you design well, we suggest you start small and grow if you can, and use professional resources if you can, so don't try and reinvent the wheel. And the last point, whoops, sorry, just trying to move my chat book so I can read it. Yeah, we've seen lots of people get started before they're ready. So what we suggest is don't start until you know all the ducks are lined up. Get all the ducks in a row and make sure you've dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and then roll your program out. Done that slide. This is just a little bit about what we do. We have a range of different offers that we can provide. We do program design. This is one of our most popular products, which is a design kit and a training kit that people can design and deliver their own program for themselves. So I am going to open it up now for discussion and questions. Love to find out who of you are running mentoring programs already. You can use the chat box or we can open up your mics. Okay, any of you using some of those different funding models? We'd love to hear that. So anyone using sponsorship, anyone that's had government support. Okay, question here. How do you set requirements for mentors? We use an application process. So we tell people what's going to be expected of them and the criteria they must meet before they apply. And then we have an application process which further screens them, and also the application process allows them to suitably match them with a mentee. Some organisations like to interview their mentors beforehand. If you have the time to do that, that's ideal, but not many organisations do.
We've got a question through asking if there's already a mentoring program in place, but it needs to be revamped with more structure. How should we address this to current mentors?
Yeah, that was the issue we had with AVA. So when, Alex, sorry, I'm just muting you because I'm getting feedback. We already had a number of mentors. They'd been through a training, but it wasn't a very good training. So we basically explained to them that this was going to really give them the next level of their mentoring skills. None of the mentees had been through it before, so we didn't have to explain anything to the mentees. I think how you address it is you talk about it from a continuous improvement perspective. We really like to see evaluation being used to continually improve and update and refine a program. So I think if you explain that to mentors, they get it. Someone's asked how many hours are typical when training mentors. Look, I do trainings for 2 days and our online training is an hour or maybe an hour and a half, depending on how long people take to go through it. It really comes down to how long the mentor is going to give you to be trained. I do executive coaching. I'm still learning. I've been doing that for over 10 years. So there's never a point to stop with mentor training. But I think, at least probably if it's face-to-face, an hour and a half. The most you can keep people online is really about an hour. We find that adequately prepares people and stops them making the major mistakes that a mentor would typically make without training. Someone's asked, you mentioned that mentees should have skin in the game. How do you measure success of the mentor so that the mentor cannot say that they did not get their money's worth? Yeah, good point. So we ask them, so we will typically survey a month in, have you met with your mentor and are you satisfied with the match? So we'll know right at the beginning that they're happy with their partner. We'll then ask them a couple of months after that, how is it going? We'll ask them a number of questions that we know whether they're getting what they need from their mentor. So specific questions around satisfaction with how the mentor's engaging with them, how much time they're getting from their mentor and so on. So we're tracking all the way through they're getting their money's worth, particularly if they've paid, it's important. And the evaluation at the end will also check on that. Peggy.
We've got a question. Peggy's asked, so is it easier in a non-profit association where people enter with a different mindset than in companies? She's quoted a time that it hasn't worked. So Peggy, we often try to set the expectation as effectively as possible at the beginning when we're doing the recruiting, and that often helps to negate a lot of the relationships not taking off or getting off the ground. If you set the expectation around what is normal for meeting, how often you meet with a mentor and a mentee each month for the 12-month period, 6-month period, 9-month period, and training the mentor and the mentee effectively, we find that there's a really good cohesion that happens. Training is actually a big one. We find from our research that 1 in 3 relationships actually fail if neither the mentor or the mentee are trained. If you train just the mentor, you get 2 out of 3 relationships succeeding. And then if you move up into the training the mentor and the mentee, you actually go above 90% success rate. So training and setting expectations would be my 2. Melissa, have you got anything to add there?
No, not really. I want to address the next question, if I may. What do you do if the relationship isn't working out for one of the parties? We like to describe the way of getting out is it's a no-fault divorce. You have to have people being able to walk away if it isn't working out. We give people a number of tools to try and help them address the problem before they walk away, but really, people will walk away anyway, so you need to assist them to do that, but give them tools to try and help them stay in the relationship if it's possible to make it work. Are there some questions to kickstart mentors and mentees to begin engaging in a new online mentorship program? I'm not sure I understand that question. Lydia, are you still there? I'm going to open your mic and ask you to... Lydia, can you talk to us? I'm not sure I understand the question. Your mic's open.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, okay, great. So we've just started a brand new online mentorship program, and we have fed into your research. So we're delighted that you actually used some of our comments in your paper.
Great.
The online mentorship program, again, we did know that millennials want just-in-time training or just-in-time relationships to be built. So that's why we did go online. We have done a lot of social media blitzes. We have done a lot of I don't know, we're trying all sorts of different ideas to get people to start their engagement. So we have mentors that have signed up, we have mentees that have signed up, and it's almost like everybody's waiting for some big whistle to blow to get things going. So we've actually started sort of a blitz for the November, sort of every week, sort of putting a question out there to get people just to start utilizing the program that has been built to just start making connections. And again, it just seems it's in dribbles and drabs, and I don't know what the magic is. We're trying to have more of a self-matching opportunity rather than me saying, okay, you will be matched with somebody else, because that's sort of what I found during all the research building up to our program. But again, it's just drips and drabs. So I don't know if there's some sort of a magic. We've even offered prizes for the best, person who's contributed for the month of, let's say, November, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It just seems that there's a lot of apathy. Everybody wants it, and yet, when it comes time to play the game, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I get it. So what you're describing is some of the typical problems you have with a more informal way of running a mentoring program, which doesn't have a particular start, beginning and an end, because this doesn't happen when you have like a program launch at which you tell everybody, right, we're starting now, okay, now here's what we expect mentees in the next month. You're going to have to think about what you want to get out of mentoring. So we call it start with a purpose in mind. It doesn't have to be a really finite objective. It doesn't have to be, one of those smart acronym objectives. But, your goal for the first month is to come up with a goal. So you kind of walk people through the process, and then because when they started, you can send them communications which say, okay, now you're 2 months in, you should be about here. If you don't do all of that, you'll find your mentoring relationships will not get traction, which you're already starting to find.
Yeah, I do find that it's almost like everybody's waiting for somebody else to do the reaching out rather than they want to reach out to somebody. So,
Yeah.
you know, we've developed the program, we've developed some interesting engagement pieces, but I don't know, it's almost like everybody needs to have a whistle.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the next thing is the whistle gets blown. I don't know.
Well, I would blow the whistle if I were you
Yeah.
and put some structure in it, because I suspect that if you don't, within a few months, you'll find it's just not taking off. So perhaps you
Well, we
round
do,
everybody up and you blow a whistle and actually launch
yeah.
it.
You know, the program does have structure. It's just more, you know, we've got those that have said, yes, I want to be a mentor, and yes, I want to be a mentee, but they don't want to reach out to each other. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'll try that, and I'll just see what, you know, maybe just sort of put it out as a, okay, here you go.
Well,
We'll try.
also maybe try giving the responsibility to reach out to the mentee.
That was our
Rather than
first
leaving
question.
it open, because you know a mentee that won't initiate is unlikely to stick for the life of a mentoring program anyway. So I
Yeah.
think maybe put a message out to the mentee saying, okay, if you haven't already made contact with your mentor, it's time to do it now. That might get a few
Yeah.
people moving. Great, thanks Lydia. The other thing you
Thank you.
might want to do
Yeah,
is go
Lydia,
to our
just
website and download
I'm
our
just sharing
data.
an article actually. I've got a how to start a mentoring program guide that we've got there. So if
Right.
you go through that document, you might find some really good tips and bits and pieces in there that might help you decide where the structure can be placed to try and get that engagement.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, Peter's made a comment about less financial resource in associations, harder to charge a fee given it's considered a value-added membership benefit. I think we need to move people away from this is a free value-added membership benefit, because to do mentoring well requires a level of investment, and I think you're better off trying to change the mindset and let people understand they need to actually pay for it than maybe trying to offer it as a free service and then doing it badly. Because so many of our clients come to us after they've launched it and it hasn't gone well, and then what you end up with is you've actually had a brand damaging program. So that's what we think, but you know, obviously that's how we like to work. I'd encourage you to look for sponsorship. I think there are a lot of sponsors out there that are interested in supporting these kinds of activities. Any other questions before we close, or comments? It's been great having your questions, so please, before you log off, we're here, but you know, also feel free to email us at any time. And we'd love you to participate in our research. There's the link. So this is the next stage of our research. Okay, it looks like we're done. So thank you very much for being involved in our webinar today. It's been great to have you and hope you've got value from it. We will send you a very short, I promise you, survey just asking a couple of questions so that we can continue to improve this. We will be running more webinars next year, so if you'd like to be invited, we'll invite you. We'd be happy to have you. So enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to maybe talking to some of you in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Tracy's just actually posted a question now asking what are our thoughts on having a sponsor participate as a mentor as part of their engagement ROI.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We have in some of the programs that we run where there's a sponsor, they actually put mentees and mentors as participants into the program. Obviously, the greater benefit is to the mentee, well, sometimes not, but the benefit to the mentors is they get the training. So great, I would definitely recommend that if it's suitable.
Yeah, great. And also Alexander's asked if we will make the slides available at the end.
We will. So we'll send that to you, to everybody that's been here today. We'll send a copy of the slides. We've also been recording the webinar, so we'll give you the link if you want to go back and watch and listen. Great, thank you. And goodbye.